welcome back everybody to another episode of BCS Community Connections. And today on the podcast, I have Robb Jenson. And Robb is owner of AGP, which stands for Avant Garde College Prep Services.
Yep.
And so what Robb does is Robb started a business here in town to help local students in the area to be able to get ready for college preparatory. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today, give him an opportunity to talk about his business that he's brought here to Bryan College Station. But first, what we want to do is we want to talk about your background a little bit, talk about where you were born, grew up, what brought you here to College Station, and eventually to open the business. So I'll let you talk on that.
Yeah, so I'm actually was born in Waco, Texas, so not too far up the road and such. And from there, very young age, my parents picked up and kind of moved away from their families and moved to the Belton area, Belton, okay, Texas. And so that's where I primarily grew up, went through elementary, middle school, high school, and everything from there. Was involved in a number of different activities, certainly, worked as such with the local country club. I also played varsity tennis just as well as all 4 years. Played some football just as well as in high school of things, okay, and did some cross country and such. So pretty involved, mostly primarily within the athletics of things. And then from there, I went on and I was a recruited tennis athlete. And so from there, I went and first attended Concordia University in Austin. Now it's called Concordia University, Texas.
Okay.
Things.
That makes sense since it's in Austin. Right?
Yeah. They went through some rebranding, about 8-10 years ago or something.
Gotcha.
But did that for a couple years playing there. Unfortunately, I had a back injury of things and started kind of looking at, maybe I need to kind of, reevaluate my, my college, what I'm going to be doing here, for my degree of sorts. And I always had the aspiration to go into Texas A&M growing up and grew up an Aggie of things. And started looking at that. I was actually admitted into A&M right out of high school, but chose to go play tennis. And then from that, started pursuing that pathway. And so okay, the originally admitted first as a transfer student. Actually had to go through blend for 2 semesters of things. So I kind of moved here with the hopes of transferring in, and then did well there at blend. And then I was then a year later and such into Texas A&M. And so that kind of led me on a pathway there. I originally thought I wanted to do physical therapy of things, and that's kind of what I ended up pursuing. My undergraduate degree there at Texas A&M was kinesiology, and I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist.
Did you see that as a connection point back to the athletic side, but also to the injury that kind of put all that on for you?
Bingo. Yeah. So I really got to experience that when I kind of injured my back. Being able to work with a therapist, kind of understand my injury that I had there, trying to rehab that and get back into playing shape, which I never really was able to ever get back all the flexibility and range of my back again. And so that kind of limited my play to some degree.
Sure. And you're obviously playing at a high level to be able to go in. Were you scholarshiped when you went in?
So it was a Division III school that I was being recruited to. So they didn't quote unquote give you athletic scholarships. Yeah. So I had a number of other scholarships that allowed me to be rewarded both academically and then some other things that kind of set aside for athletes and stuff. But the majority of it was paid for things.
Gotcha.
And the cost of college was a lot different back then too.
just a hair.
Yeah. It's amazing that a private school back then cost, I think, $15,000 a year, which nowadays you can't even go to A&M for that.
Maybe a semester.
Yeah, semester or something. Yeah, exactly.
Depending on what you're taking.
But yeah, I ended up having a lot of that sort of paid for back then, and didn't really have to come out of pocket and things. But I kind of set back. I had moved here to town, had, a couple of friends and lived with some there, and was working on my academics and getting those grades in a better position for me to transfer into Texas A&M. And that happened, and I graduated of things. But I kind of found myself right afterwards, I was working here at a local hospital at St. Joseph's, and as a physical therapy technician, mm-hmm, which quite honestly didn't really require a bachelor's degree. So I was doing that and largely learning a lot about the industry of physical therapy. I was working with patients of things, getting in, work with them a lot of the exercises, learning from both physical therapy assistants and the therapists themselves about what they did in assessing patients. A lot to learn about wound care too. So I didn't really realize that was industry, or that part was sort of attached to physical therapy. And got to really do a lot of cool stuff. I really enjoyed it. I really learned how things operate within a professional environment, just how much it means to how the presentation and the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing, just how much people count on you to do a really good job and stuff. Because again, these are people's lives that they're I don't want to say they're in life and death situations, but again, they're means to be able to rehab.
Well, and you're representing the organization as a small part of that, but the overall umbrella of the organization as well too, that's got the name carried over it. So
yeah, most definitely and such. And so I learned a lot. That was a tremendous learning experience for me and things. But I did that, and after I graduated my bachelor's, and that kind of took off. That was about a year and a half, and I was working the process applying to physical therapy school. Well, and then I applied and I was denied. So I was kind of having this mid-20s crisis of sorts.
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, okay,
this isn't in the game plan.
Yeah, this is definitely, it wasn't anticipating this roadblock or anything. So I had to really kind of do some soul searching and kind of think back, like, okay, what am I going to do? I have a young lady that I'm in love with, the things like we have aspirations of getting married, and someday having kids and house and all those other things and stuff. And and I think, I don't know what I was getting paid back then, like $12 an hour or something, 13 or something. So, but within that, I kind of had to really do some soul searching and kind of figure out. Well, I originally went off to college and I really wanted to be an educator. Like I wanted to do teach math or physics or something, and then also to be a tennis coach. But then I kind of learned along the way that through one of my classes, there's two types of coaches: those that have been fired and those that will be fired.
Right.
and so I didn't really like the volatility of it, and just like how somewhat of a nomadic the career can be. And so I didn't
you need to only ask a coach's wife, and they will give you the lowdown on that, of how many times they've moved, cities they've moved to. You're right.
I have a sister-in-law. Her husband's a college baseball coach.
So even worse. Even worse.
I see front row seat there with that.
Yeah.
But then within that, I was I was kind of thinking, well, I don't really the aspect of me teaching just high school was an appeal or draw for me of things. And then I started looking around, and then Texas A&M had this program that was called Higher Education Administration. And it was for folks who largely worked with college students. And I was like, wow, that sounds kind of cool. It sounds really interesting of things. Like, I was first generation. And so there was a lot of things that I kind of had to really sort of just figure out on my own. Like
work through.
Yeah. Like I didn't really know, like, I kind of eventually found like, oh, well, these people know what I need to know, they have these answers or this and such. And so my study habits were also pretty, quite poor in themselves of things. So I applied to the program. I got in provisionally of things, and they really just, gave me a shot, and I did everything that I could. And I certainly did. And then I was admitted full time into the program, into the second semester of things. And so, from there, I really kind of just started to take off and just kind of really understand what it meant to just individual and personal development and growth of things. Like just for myself, learning how to really just reach out to individual resources and collaborating with other people. And it was just like this whole like just new world that was sort of opened up to me and things. And so met a lot of fabulous people through that program. Both within the students themselves, the faculty of things, other entities and departments around campus and such, and was given a lot of different opportunities within the Career Center, which are general academic programs. Those are some of the ones that initially come off my mind of things. And then from there, I graduated and I went into, was hired on within honors program. And so there was a young woman, who took me in at things, and it was primarily who ended up being my mentor of things. And so her name is Myra Gonzalez, and largely is responsible for where I am today, and coached me a lot through that position. And so I took the position of retention and assessment coordinator, which was primarily kind of a very new position. They had someone sort of in it, but it didn't really sort of like fit their individual skills, but me coming from a background of just loving data, loving analytics, loving to sort of study numbers of things. And so here I was presented this opportunity like, hey, you're in charge of like the 5,000 academic scholarships of folks who are receiving those scholarships here at Texas A&M and their academic development of things. And so within that, I really sort of studied those numbers, kind of better understand which populations of students which we could see early on were going to be indicators of maybe have more problematic situations with their grades and retaining those scholarships. And so really kind of took that program and just made it my own baby of things, because there was really no expectations with it. No one had really sort of
you were chartering basically uncharted waters in this role basically at that point.
Yeah, and so within that, I really just took the reins of it and just made the most of that, and so had a lot of success with it. I think some of the things that I implemented back then are still in place today, like 15 years later and such, and within that. And I really thrived in that position as such. And so that gave me another stepping stone in growth. Well, then from there, it sort of evolved into, we were then enveloped by scholarships in financial there at Texas A&M. And so there we kind of worked with some programs, but there I was given more of a leadership role within these programs. We called these transition programs. So like folks that we recruited into school, not only were they recruited into school, we were responsible for their 4 years worth of development of things and then transitioning out of college. So, them going into the workforce, the professional force of things. Maybe it was graduate school or pre-professional school of things.
Right.
So I really got to start seeing firsthand, how do you take someone who is 17, 18 years old, recruit them into college, and then mentor them through those 4 years, and then out into their next step of things. And so that's probably one of my first steps of really just, again, coaching. I always wanted to be a coach, and so this was giving me an opportunity to kind of coach those students and have a lot of frequent contact with them, because we would meet with them as freshmen weekly of things, because there's just, there's a lot of turbulence that can happen through that year of them trying to get themselves situated. And then after that, it was once a month of things. And so being able to sort of make contact, check up on them, see how things are going, set a set of action items of things. Okay, move forward. These are things we need to see from you. Keep doing this. Okay, check in next month. And so that's primarily became the basis of how I conduct a lot of what I do today.
Yeah, it sounds like it built the foundation of understanding, probably more than anything else, what that transition looks like from start to finish. And not even just there in the college spectrum. So now you're kind of dialing that down the process to go, okay, let's talk about how we get from, in college, I'm seeing them from start to finish. Let's talk about how we get them up and ready to get into the front side of college, which is where you're meeting most of them at the beginning. And then working them through a process plan to get them out, right? And get them, whatever, situated, stabilized, whatever word, you attach to that after they're, these days, I don't know what word you attach to it when you leave college. For some people, it's right back into your parents' home or something.
And the boomerangs of things, Yeah,
send it out and it comes right back. So let's talk about how Avant Garde started. Let's start first with the name. So you are, let me back that up a little bit. So you're employed. You have a decent job at this point. You're with A&M, you got a decent job. So what works through your mind here to go, man, I want to go start this other deal?
I always told my wife I wanted to own a business someday. Okay. Like I didn't know what it was. Like I wanted to be running something. Like I just, I really don't like the word no so much. And then within that, like, for me, I always felt like I was trying to do as well as I can to advocate for the students. Everything that I was doing within the programs was to knock down walls, knock down barriers, to make everything a little bit more seamless in some ways to set them up for success and stuff. And I don't know, when you're working with large bureaucratic organizations,
trust me, I've spent half of my life doing that.
And there's a lot of stability and comfort in that. There really is of things.
Sure.
And so, but for me, like it just didn't fit my personality of things. And so for me, like I always had sort of the mindset that if you're staying the same and you're doing the same thing, you're being left behind and stuff. And so for me, I was always looking for ways to continually evolve things, continually update, improve things. That's just sort of my my mindset as someone who's largely is critical and that sort of way of thinking of analyzing and assessing things. It's like you kind of always notice the sort of minor imperfections of things,
right.
And within that, how you can kind of keep polishing and refining, and then there's something else pops up with things. But I mean, I loved what I did there. It was awesome. I had worked with some tremendous people. The students were awesome with things. But my wife actually kind of put this bug in my ear, and so she, give her a lot of the credit here of things. She's like, hey, there's these folks who like meet with high school students and they do quite well for themselves and things and stuff. And I was like, what? Like, people like pay for that or something like that of things. And so I kind of really started looking at it a little bit more. And within it, I began to realize and sort of like, oh yeah, these folks like in Austin have this, and Dallas and Houston, and there are all these other metropolitans. And it's not just one individual; there's like multiple individuals there. And I really started begin to understand individually of independent education consulting of things, and started looking at the demographics and the population numbers here, and like, okay, yeah, Bryan College Station, we've got Bryan High School, we've got consolidated, but then it's like, okay, we're going to get College Station High School, and then Rudder was going to be brought into the fold of things, and so everything kept showing from the data that we were really taking off as a community within regards to the population, the size of things, and so I began thinking, like, I think something like this can work here. Of things.
What time frame are we at? 2011.
Yeah, this is about 2011
okay.
of things. And as we're looking at it, and I began to kind of do some really early exploration of things. And then kind of in 2012, it sort of picked up. And so I started getting this idea that I think I can do this of things. And so at first, it started where I was, I actually had another partner along with this, but they kind of had to drop out because of, let me just rewind just a second. So I had my job with scholarships and financial aid, and then I left intentionally and purposely to go work for nuclear engineering at Texas A&M for the graduate programs of things. And so within that, there really wasn't any conflict of interest anymore. I wasn't awarding scholarships to freshmen or anything like that and such. And so I felt really that I could comfortably pursue this without all that. And so I
still similar line of sight job wise though, as far as what you're doing. You're just not initiating. You're not initiating on the front side with scholarships and things like that. Yeah,
and that job that job taught me something else too. There at Nuclear Engineering was here. They had the number 2 program in the nation of things. So I instead of recruiting like 5-star athletes, I was recruiting 5-star brains.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I was bringing them onto campus. I was wine and dining them. They were like having offers from like MIT and Michigan and Wisconsin and like all these just top-notch nuclear engineering programs. And I learned a lot from that, just not from the students, but I would always, I'd have kids coming in from like Cal Berkeley and all these schools, and I'd pick their brains, like, what are you doing? What's your undergraduate experience like? What sort of things are you involved with? And quite honestly, those kids don't care about class. Class is something you go and get through.
Right.
What they cared about was the big idea. They were caring about like them coming together with their friends and trying to create the next app that's going to be the next TikTok or something like that or something, But that's what these kids primarily cared about, is like classes was just something you did. Like that was just, you went, you learned and stuff, but everything else that they were really learning took place outside of class.
That's really an interesting statement, and especially the way, if you're a little bit older adult, in the way that you were transitioned into college to think about it, like everything really wrapped up around GPA. It wrapped up around, I'm here to get my degree, but I'm here to get my degree with what GPA? I got to go to these classes. I got to attend these things. I've got to do well at all of this stuff. And that transition is really generational. Where you see a different outlook of it, but I don't think that's a confinement. I don't think this generation looks at it as like, okay, these classes confine me within this structure of thought, right? Yeah. So it's more so based of, I realize I got to do this to get this, but this isn't going to confine me into where I could be or what I could be doing.
Yeah, most definitely of things. And so, as they sort of pursue that and trying to do that, it's kind of a vehicle in some ways. It's just kind of get you to where you need to go, but once you're out of the vehicle, it's kind of upset, what you're going to do with it from there and stuff.
So in dealing with that generational change, and looking at bringing AGP to life, and then trying to meet all of that at a generational change. Because that generational change, what's really interesting is the shift is probably happening at a faster pace than probably any time we can think of. Meaning there are so many avenues of influence, really with a lot of that influence being social influence, right?
True.
That is changing the landscape for how college is viewed, is changing the landscape for how getting into college is viewed. And so you bring this deal into life. AGP comes to life in 2012, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so you bring that business to life, and here we are. We were talking in pre-show. I'm like, yeah, you're almost 10 years in. I mean, you're going to cross the 10-year mark.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It is.
But even in that 10 years, I'm sure just the transitional change of what you've seen generationally in 10 years is probably phenomenal, right? And you then have to, I'm assuming, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here in front of where we're at, but I'm assuming that you probably have to constantly be changing, identifying that way of learning to then structure a program that works well for that generational change. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah, you kind of have to, again, you're always evolving of things, and certainly the students that I was working with 10 years ago were different from what I am today.
Sure.
With things, and so it kind of keeps me young.
Yeah. I could imagine.
I kind of play up the dad joke a little bit more stuff of things, but as I got a little bit older, but they certainly do, as you're working with that demographic of things, you just stay young. You kind of, you hear the things that they're doing, what they're a part of, and just the latest developments of things. So a lot of the sidebar conversations that you have with them of things.
So AGP comes in. Tell me about the name.
Yeah. So, Avant Garde, so just kind of going back through a transition, I left scholarships, went to nuclear engineering, and then shortly thereafterwards I launched Avant Garde, and I actually had someone on the front end that was kind of helping me with this. She wasn't able to necessarily continue; she kind of dropped off very early and stuff. But she actually came up with the name Avant Garde. She had a really big, really into French culture of things, and we were brainstorming, and then she said, I came across Avant Garde, which means advanced group of things in French. Kind of very forward-thinking, radical, progressive in a sense of trying to do things that aren't necessarily being done. And that's what we were trying to do, is we were on the opposite end of seeing where students, how they were looking as to when they come in and how they needed to look when they left of things. And so I hear all the time, students come to me, I want to be a physical therapist, or I want to be an engineer or something like that. And so within that, we well understood what students needed to look like as they arrived to college, so that they have the means of having that early success, so that dream of theirs could then continue. And we saw a lot of students who came in some ways who've had all these ideas and these ambitions, and it sort of unraveled there within the first year of things. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm trying to, within the organization of Avant Garde there, is that, we're trying to help students and setting them up onto a particular pathway. So whatever those initial ambitions or goals that they may have in some ways, that they can be in a really good way in a position to achieve them. So
let's talk about those services a little bit and kind of where you meet them. Also kind of when you meet them. I mean, is there a demographic of grade where you tend to see that interaction being most valuable? I'm assuming it's not at senior year, in other words, I guess what I'd be saying, but are you seeing that pre-planning of kind of working AGP into the processes here at an earlier stage than, hey, I'm in my senior year and I really got to figure out how to get into college now, and I haven't maybe lined up my last 3 years real well, and I'm crossing my fingers and praying for a miracle here in year 4 and my senior year to try and pull this out. When do you see that I don't want to say intervention, I don't know that that's a good terminology we want to put here, but when do you see that the interjecting of AGP into a high school student's timeline tends to work best for them, and what services are you offering that parents, students find most valuable in that interjection?
Well, it definitely varies. I think you kind of have to understand your child, sort of the maturity for what they have, or they kind of at that position where they're going to be receptive to some coaching of things. Are they going to be kind of receptive to trying some new things of sorts? I always tell parents that it's a 50-50. I'm going to meet them halfway, and then they need to meet me the other halfway of things. In order for this relationship that we have to work, for that, they have to do that, and they have to trust. They have to trust the process of things. And so sometimes you may not necessarily see as to where it's going to eventually end up of things. That's kind of my job, is to kind of like always tell folks is I'm looking down the road of things. I need you to kind of walk on, like, trust the process and understand what the initial steps may be in front of you. Yeah, of things.
Sounds like something a coach would say.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I mean, certainly I think as you sort of introduce it, I also think like the bigger the ambitions of colleges that you may have in some ways in mind. If you're if you're looking at, Texas A&M, that top 10% rule, if you're kind of outside that top 10%, especially probably outside that top quarter, you're going to have some work to do with things. And so you got an uphill, challenge that you're going to have to kind of be more prepared for. UT, if you're not in top 6%, you got some challenges in front of you. Just last year, they had 66,000 applications.
Wow.
66,000. And within that, if you're
that's our student population at A&M.
Yeah. And the thing about it too is, if you're not in that top 6%, your odds of getting in about 8 to 10%. That's Ivy.
Yeah.
That's Ivy selectivity there.
Wow.
The things. And so within that, it's largely understanding what their initial ambitions may be and start trying to venture down that pathway. And so that's all, try to do is put things in front of them to help them understand what that may be.
When would you like to see them in the program?
Last year I did have a 7th grader.
Wow.
Things.
Okay. So early.
Yeah, I did have a 7th grader and an 8th grader. I really start filling up kind of that sophomore, junior year of things. Within it, I do limit the number of students I do take per class year, just because I want to make sure that I can give them the attention.
I saw on your website, is it 10?
10 per year. 10 per year.
Yeah, so I told you I tried to do the research.
Yeah, you did, man. It's good.
So 10, so that you don't want to water down the program. Because I'm sure you could probably take in more than 10. But the idea of it is there's a certain number there at point where teacher to student ratio becomes critical, especially with what you're trying to move forward with. Do you find that some of your styles of teaching, learning, does it get sideways with what curriculum in public schools is teaching?
I don't know if I see anything there that conflicts with it or anything.
It's funny. What's funny for me is, I got a 5th grader getting ready to start 5th grade. First thing they tell the parents, when we go, I really think it started in 3rd grade, is they tell the parents, listen, we understand y'all learn math different, than they are learning math. Yeah. Don't teach them the way y'all learned. We want them to learn this way, because this is going to prepare them for down the road when they're taking more advanced classes. And that first year, man, when my kid is coming home in 3rd and 4th grade, and I'm like, well, this is real simple. And then I watch them go through this process. And it is a lengthy process to get to an answer. And again, at that point, I'm trying to delve in and understand the process more than anything else, just so that I don't veer off of what the teachers have asked. But it is hard when you've subjected yourself to a different form of training or a different upbringing of teaching, and you see this and you don't see, like you were saying earlier, down the path of what this is going to lead to and why this is important. The very first math process that I saw my daughter do, I said, okay, you got this plus this, so walk me through how the teacher showed you to do this. And she takes her pen and she just starts, and she makes all these dots on the page. And I'm like, what in the world are you doing? And she's like, well, I put 8 dots here, I put 4 dots here, put 7 dots over here. Then I'm going to circle these up in 5s. And then I'm going to count 5, 10, 15. And I'm like, what in the world, And so as a parent, where I'm looking at that, I'm like, and it's funny because you'll see videos all the time where people put up like how long this process takes versus how long the old process took. Yeah. But in the regimen training that is being pushed down through public schooling, regimen's probably not a good word to use, but people will understand where I'm going with that, I guess, versus you coming in. And one of the statements that I made to you when we were in pre-show was Avant Garde. If you look that up, basically is like you were saying what the French term of it is, but if you look at it online, it basically is kind of outside of the box thinking. It's not necessarily just this derived notion of structure. It's more so the idea of we're going to be a little more unique. We're going to be a little bit more outside of the realm. So when I was asking about, does that conflict sometimes with what you see come in from public schooling side of that, and knowing that you're still writing curriculum based on what the changes are in, again, there's going to be state changes that are going to happen in curriculum. But if you're looking at the long-term game of, I'm looking at curriculum for college, I'm not looking at curriculum for what your next year is going to be as a sophomore, as a junior, or whatever. I'm looking for where your curriculum is heading towards college and trying to put you in the best line of sight to be successful there. So interjecting, the majority, are you seeing them high school age is usually when they hit you 9th, 10th?
Yeah. It has become, I'm getting more earlier interest as we've sort of, the more time that has elapsed and the more we've been in business of things. So certainly some families of mine that they may have used me and they had an older child and they're like, well, we really see the benefit. We want to get them started earlier of things. And so that's been part of it to things. Others we've heard or seen some other stories or contact with another student to things. And so, and then I always encourage families to come kind of just, talk to me. Just kind of give me, and let's just see what some of your general aspirations are. And from that conversation, I can largely sort of have an assessment of things like, yeah, you know what, you're really doing quite well with things. And I had that a couple of weeks ago with a family just called me and it's like, you're doing everything for what you have in mind, what you want to accomplish of things. You're doing really well with that.
Right.
And some others, they come and they're like, well, you probably want to start a little bit sooner or things like that. You certainly may want to reach out after this point once you have these certain scores or something, or if you're really shooting for these other things, then this is you might want to begin now or things.
Well, I think that's important for people to hear in that it's not necessarily that free consultation is you're sitting there going, here's somebody I can sign up. Yeah, there would probably be nothing more than you'd love to do to be able to sign up as a potential student that's going to join the program, but you also you don't want to dilute your program. So in other words, let's just say that one that's on track, or if not even tracking in front, the parents just like what they hear from you and everything else. And you go, okay, well, we'll take them into the program, but you take somebody into the program who's already excelling. And if they don't, if they're already ahead or way ahead of track on what you see would get them to where their end goal is, and you bring them in, you may essentially bring them in with not a huge amount of result, showing in the front side of that progress. And then all of a sudden the parents are like, well, what are we paying for here? You're like, this is what my program really wants to intersect and come into your students' schooling life here. But we want to do it right. We know that where we're successful at is this range of students here that has these particular needs or needs to improve these particular parts of their schooling. And if you've got somebody where, every parent wants better for their kid, there's definitely no doubt about that. But if you're picky and you're sitting there going, I think you're okay, and I think maybe if you want to come back in a year or 2 years and we can reassess where your kid is at, so that I can tell you, I think you're going to be on track to be able to get into the school that your kid wants to get into, we can do that as well too. So it says a lot about you and your business to not just be, let me grab the next one that walks in the door because they're interested in it. Like, we really want to give an evaluation that really gives you a clarity as a parent of where your kid is and what you can potentially do that right now may just be your involvement as a parent to that. It may not need, it may not need Rob's involvement or his staff that's working with him to come in and intercede, but somewhere down the road it may. And it may be a 1-year process as opposed to getting them in the 9th grade and working them up from there.
Yeah, very true. And within that, something I've been trying to do as of lately is kind of have more of a selection of variety, more wider bevy of options. And so some folks may come in full-blown consultation, meeting with them month to month, the things following, tracking their high school experience and such, and helping to enhance certain elements of their high school profile. The other thing is some of them might be, again, tracking really well of things, and maybe you only need us in the senior year. Maybe you only need us to help us, kind of sort out those last remaining colleges that would be best for you or something, or along with, polishing the application up or help, storyboard in the essay or things like that. And that's all you need from us of things. So we do have kind of a variety, a level of services, so depending on how much contact, how much engagement from what you may need from us. Of things, and that's what we continue to kind of work on as we can, be able to sort of meet more of the individual client needs in that way. So it's not a one size fits all, and that kind of dates back to A&M when I was back there. They had a program where students, if you were under a scholarship of things, and then everyone went to the same program, everyone went through the same training of things. But what I learned from that is that you may have some students underneath maybe they're 2/10 under where they need to be. Maybe they had a 2.8 and they needed a 3.0. Well, that's quite different from someone who has a 2.1 and is facing suspension of their scholarship.
Right.
And so again, you kind of develop a level of services that again meets them to the sort of level of engagement or contact that they need and stuff. So that's kind of what we have now. I started unfolding those services. I think it was last year. Maybe 2 years ago, and we've kind of expanded on that to things.
So to be clear, AGP is not a tutoring business. It's
Correct.
It's not to bring your kid in and show them, hey, do math better this way or do this better this way. It really is preparation for long-term goal, right? So ACT, SAT, PSAT programs, AP placements.
We are starting to develop AP this year. That's something we're looking into. There's kind of a bigger, being prioritized more.
Right.
So within that, we're looking to expand into start offering some AP preparation.
So tell me what it looks like. Let's say I come in and I join. I'm selected as a part of those 10 candidates that are in there. What does that look like for my student that comes in? Is this after school programs that they are coming in, spending time with your instructors? Is this weekends? Tell me what this looks like for them.
So if I meet with a family, I look over their academics of things. I like from what I see and such. And so, and their goals and what I can offer seem to mesh really well. Then I'll accept them as a client. The first meeting I have with them, I just spend 45 minutes. I'm just picking their brain. I'm asking them all types of questions. What are the things that you do? How do you spend your free time? What sort of things do you read? What sort of things do you watch on television? What are some of the things that are really sort of, that are excited and, that you're fascinated with and such. And so then I spend that time kind of getting to understand them and really to get into their mindset of things and then understanding their goals. And then from there, I then craft a plan. And so I start setting some action items of things for which we can do, 3 or 4 different things. And it's evaluating things within the activities they're part of, how well they're involved in service and within the community, how things which they're doing on their own accord to sort of do personal enrichment of sorts. It could mean test preparation as well. It could mean academics just as well. And then once we've sort of agreed on what those action items and those initiatives that we're going to put into place are, then they're going to do them, and so they're going to go out and explore them and try those things, and then within that they're going to come back. We're going to debrief them, talk about them, what you learned from them, what you like about them, what you didn't like about them, and try to confirm what they like and they don't like. A lot of times students come and they're oh, I want to do this. I want to be an architect. Well, what is that? What do you do? How do you start preparing for that?
Right.
What are some of the things they're involved with? And so for me, it's kind of almost removing some of the cloud of mystery that surrounds them in some ways with that. And then they may find like, oh, well, I don't want to do this. I don't like doing that. Well, they're one step closer from where they were of things.
Right.
And so they start kind of, even though they found something they didn't necessarily enjoy, then that's one less thing or one step closer for where you want to be. And we can start looking into a different avenue or pathway of things. And they may also find like, hey, I really love this of things. And then it's just like feeding the beast. Okay, well, what else more can you do? What else can you begin learning of things? So it's trying to set them ahead. And that's the Avant Garde, is like you're putting them ahead of the others of things.
Right.
So when they get to college, when they arrive to college, they arrive in a position to have early success. Maybe they've already interned with someone, or maybe they've already conducted some. I have students who do research right now of things on campus.
So I'm curious as to, do you also meet those students you were talking about, okay, where you find out that student thinks they want to do this and they decide that they don't, and in the process of kind of working through what their interests are, what their perceived career path is. I think something that's really probably frustrating for a lot of parents is paying for a degree that doesn't generate anything, right? Like, I want to be a fine arts major or something like that, and or I'm gonna study Spanish, and you really kind of pigeonhole yourself into certain potential career avenues that may right now exist, but long term again as well, will it exist in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road, so that there can be a long term career? Do you try to advise in any of those particular situations where you're like, okay, that kid walks in and says, I really like history, that's where I excel at. Okay, well, what do you see yourself doing with a history? If you were going to go and get into college, would you see yourself becoming a history school teacher, a historian? Are you going to work off in a library? Or where do you see that meeting? Or even in some cases, even bringing the big challenge, I would imagine, is, I'm thinking, if you're meeting parent and student, am I working a career path for the student, or am I working a career path that the parents want for the student, and being able to differentiate those and separate that?
Quite often it works out pretty well. Now, not to say there's been a couple, tough moments of things, and you're always trying to balance that just as well. But within that, and if someone comes to me, really enjoys history, it's like, trying to learn ways from which we can explore that. And like, what are some of the other skills that are coming out of that? Maybe it's their means of being able to write really well or something like that. Or again, maybe the research skills. Or, what other things? So it's all about, like, again, having tangible skills that you can then take with you as you sort of depart that part of your life of things, and moving into the next part of things. Because just having that knowledge in itself, in some ways, it might have some application, but it might be limited in some ways. So, but there are other things that you could do that make yourself more marketable in ways. Right.
And could put you in line for better success down the road. Whereas a lot of unfortunate situations is that student gets into senior year, starts doing college tours, starts looking around, and hey, I want to be a veterinarian, right? A&M's got one of the best vet schools in the nation. All of a sudden, parents are like, okay, let's go to A&M. We're going to go tour the vet school and see what's going on. And I'm saying this not because I've done it, but I have a friend who did this recently with his junior in high school. And so she goes, I want to be a veterinarian. And not only do I want to be a veterinarian, I want to be a veterinarian that specializes in tropical birds. And so, again, I'm not really thinking about that as listening to him telling me about it. And they come into town, they stay with us, and they go and they take the tour, and he comes back and he's like, do you know how much vet school is? I go, yeah, I got a pretty good idea how much vet school is. He goes, do you know how much specialized vet school is? I was like, no, why don't you tell me about that? And he tells me a number, and I'm like, what? Like, your kid is going to need a very good job to get out of here just to pay that back as a part of the process. And it also then becomes like the parent now all of a sudden after the tour is over there like, what if we did this instead of that? And, it's unfortunate to find those during tour times where you're running through, as opposed to I don't know that the resources exist at the high school level for kids to get that kind of conversation when you're talking about, maybe a high school counselor is there, but is responsible for a group of, 3,000 people that might be in that school, and being able to spend the time necessary to have those conversations. Do they really have the full understanding of college placement, as opposed to just, getting grades in line to get into a college?
Yeah.
And you're really more so looking at specifics. So if I come to you and I say, hey, look, man, I'm trying to get into Baylor. I want to go study medicine at Baylor. And now all of a sudden you're looking at it going, okay, let's break this down as to what Baylor typically is looking for.
Yeah.
Let's see where you're at, And again, if I can if AGP can come and interject in that in sophomore, junior year, as opposed to senior year, because if they're coming to you later, the time scale, to a certain extent, if you're trying to affect your grade point average, it's a lot harder to impact that grade point average in year 4 than it is with 2-3 more years to go.
It becomes more cemented in some ways. So
and moving the needle becomes really challenging. And now you're really leaning into, for those students that are coming in, are you now leaning in, if you know that the impact for senior year may be a little more challenging, are you leaning into ACT, SAT as potential preps to be able to say, let's look at a program where we can get you in and get you, because you do offer test preparations for that as well too.
It really depends on each student, and kind of making your assessment of things and sort of putting together a game plan that that gives them the best chance. And certainly, and so within that, that's something I'm always trying to explain to both the parents and the students of what kind of, where they happens to lie within a particular application pool, depending on what school of things. And I think that's one of the things that largely I'm able to understand is I've seen a very wide array of talent, of student talent, and so I think that gives me a very unique perspective as I'm looking at a student and understanding, like, okay, where does this student potentially fit in? Where does this student fit in? And then what sort of maybe the individual gaps that may lie within their profile of how to make them more, I guess you could say, just more desirable in some ways for admission. And it may not just be admissions, it might be scholarships, might be special programs of things that are within the college just as well. So, but yeah, there's, test preparation that we have, both the SAT and the ACT. We're one of the few companies in town that actually have a course for each. The thing that many families don't understand is that, one, colleges take both. So it's not just the SAT or the ACT, and they don't favor one or the other. Okay? And secondly is that they're two different tests of things. So even though they primarily share about 80% of the same information, the way that they set it up, the presentation of things, the way the problems are set up, the nuances that are associated with them, the formatting of things, that they're very different. And so I'm really a big advocate of just pick one. We offer free SAT, ACT analysis. Come in, take one with us. Let's sit down. Let's look at the results of things. Especially with the environment of test optional of things. Your child, if I don't see a potential pathway of them getting to a position to where it would be helpful in some ways, then maybe you need to spend your efforts in some other ways. And so why go through all that burdensome of time and effort and energy and just the frustrations of it? And so with some.
Well, and again, you want to make sure that you don't represent your company in a form or fashion that can't help in the way that a parent may be wanting you to help.
I don't want everyone to set expectations that I'm, in a position where in the end that they're not going to be happy with things and stuff. And so that's something that I'm also well aware of and looking at.
So we kind of identified your inspiration into starting this business, and that you were really responsible when you were starting in the here at Texas A&M, overseeing the academic side, that you really kind of saw all of these individuals coming in from year to year, semester to semester in some cases. Did you identify potential things that you saw or looked at that went because we're talking about one of the things that I think is really undervalued is that community service side, right? Like where that extra time is being spent in a community that can really be reflective upon, you're looking at trying to get an entrance in here, and you're building, we'll call it a resume, right? You're building a resume to give to A&M, to give to Texas, to be a part of that 66,000 pool. And what is it here that really kind of makes you stand out? What are some of the things that you saw in that time frame that really would make a student, outside of GPA? I mean, GPA is going to be an obvious. An ACT, SAT score is going to be an obvious. What are some of the other criteria that you saw that would make a student stand out in the application process of acceptance?
I always talk about three things in every application that I help a student to submit, and that's the 3 Ps: purpose, passion, personality. The things. And so, I never ask a student to do anything that they don't necessarily understand its purpose of things. Okay. And just as well as their passion. And so that we're sort of feeding that in a way. So with service, it's finding ways and avenues to sort of, develop individual skills, maybe become more knowledgeable of some of the local issues that are taking place within our community or something. Finding ways that you can kind of give back in a way, to the community, and so that's very big. And the other thing is that as students is that you have one thing that you can choose to kind of invest, and that's your time, because you don't really have any money at this time, right? What I also call like the 3 W's of how you can give the things. You can have wealth and give money to something, right, which they don't have. You can give wisdom, which, quite honestly, at their age, they really don't have a lot to sort of part with, right, the things. Or you can work, and so that's for them, is they can work, they can give their time, they can invest into other things, to help to improve those just as well within the community. But as well, they're investing into themselves. Is they're coming to learn more about who they are, the relationships that they're developing with people within that and stuff. So it's important for them to find things, issues of sorts, or other issues or problems within the community that they can certainly be part of and trying to solve.
And create an identity in that process as well too. School organizations, right? Another kind of, whether that's student body, whatever that is, that they can run for. They can join specific organizations that have tangible outlooks of success that ties an identity to that. So, for some people that's, I'm honors, whatever. They join the AP advancements, and they're able to put that again on their quote. We'll quote all this as resume, right? Yeah. Because essentially that's what they're doing, is they're building this resume to be able to place in front of someone to go yay or nay, right? Yeah. And I would also think that the college, to an extent, so there's a false sense sometimes in society that the college is like, hey, listen, man, you're in, you're out, whatever, we're going to get your money, and if you're out, we're still going to get your money, and we're going to move on, right? Like there's a thought process that once you get to college, listen, nobody really cares. Like, it's all on you. It's really about what you do from there. But I would imagine that at the admissions side of that in a college, there is this identity being built in that little resume that comes across where you're going, this is someone who's really worked hard to build an identity even prior to hitting us. Yeah. And what would this look like long term for us to say, let's say it's Sally Jones that, has put the resume in front of us, and, she's a senior with a 3.7, and she's done community service work where she's created recycle programs. She's a part of this organization. She's actively involved in school functions, and what athletics kind of becomes people's first go-to, where they think about being involved in school. But that comes across the desk. I would have to believe that a certain part that the admissions is looking at that and going, Sally Jones, who is this, who was on the news in this particular, community, who, actively started this particular program in this community, could be Sally Jones, alumni of Texas A&M University. That they look at that as, putting our stamp, even on the front side. I mean, it's a lot of pressure, obviously, and I'm sure that's not communicated back downward, but also the idea of going, okay, yeah, this is also Billy Jones, the brother, who gets in trouble everywhere in town and who has a nice little record already, and, and not so great, and here's his admission letter to want to try and get into here. And, you're balancing these down, knowing that there's only a certain number of spots. There's only going to be a certain number of candidates you're going to be able to take. You're also going to be taking, like in your particular situation where you go to blend and you're knocking it out of the park at blend so that you can get in and do the jump, that some of those spots also are being held or identified for people who are working on a backside process, maybe at a JUCO or something like that, to get their grades up or to get it to an acceptable level to be able to make the jump across. I think the idea also is this generational change is also met with a probably a real world concern long term, that how much value will college carry in 10 more years?
10 more years, yeah.
I mean, we know what value it carries to have to pay for it, but you're getting this group of people who are coming up. Like I've got a kid in the family that at one point, I think he's gotten past it, thank goodness. But at one point, it's like, man, I'm not going to need to go to college. I'm going to be a professional gamer, and I'm going to make all my money playing video games and all this stuff. And you want to talk about a percentage or
the odds of success.
Oh man, I mean it's pretty low, right? But driven, definitely doing the work, playing video games and doing all that other kind of stuff. But the idea, like you were saying earlier, of this generation coming in and not really being confined to class or class load, but more so being confined to, what do I want to do? And it's also met with, what do I want to do to be happy, right? Because college can be stressful for most students during their journey through that 4, 8, 12, whatever your career long that looks like in college. It's stressful enough as it is. It's stressful for them to work themselves into a situation, especially if you have parents that are really kind of pushing on the backside. The kids who, like you were saying earlier, is first generation college student. Yep. Maybe nobody in their family has gone, and this is the kid that everybody's kind of, hanging it around the neck to go, you're going to be it. That pressure of also having family push behind you to drive you. And quite honestly, most of that's done out of good intent.
Yeah, good intentions.
Listen, I want you to be better and have better opportunity than what I did. I mean, I can definitely identify as one of those parents. But I think also that opportunity to give your kid every advantage is also something that a lot of parents want to look at. AGP is kind of one of those deals. Yeah. You're putting yourself really in the line of student sight and parent sight to go, we're another avenue of potential success, and to be able to give you a little bit more information than you're maybe going to be able to get from your high school counselor, who has limited time and limited resources to really be able to help give you the details on that. And it is, there's a certain level of reality, I think, that probably gets brought from your side in those free consultations of, like, that kid comes in and says, man, I want to get into Harvard. And you go, okay, well, let's look at those numbers. You're a senior this year, right? Yeah. And you're going, yeah, I'm a senior. I got a 3.2. My ACT is about a 23. I think I'm okay here. What do you think? Yeah. And then you're over there going, well, let's talk about what we think as opposed to what they think. Yeah. Because you're really not looking at it at the point of your personal opinion on it. You're really, like you said earlier, you're a math guy. Yeah. Your statistics, your data, your numbers. Yeah. And a lot of the times, especially when it comes to high level college entrance exams and what their expectations are and everything else, the numbers aren't going to lie.
Very, very true. And those numbers, a lot of times, what they used to do, they just kind of let you into the club. So if you think about a club and you're like, oh yeah, you've got these GPA, you've got these test scores, you've got these, and you're just getting let in through the club door. That doesn't necessarily mean you've been accepted. That just means now you're being reviewed.
We'd love to, we'd love to have you here.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's, that's part of it is, having those conversations with families, maybe having to redirect a little bit and try to reframe some of the expectations to some degree and stuff, but whatever is going to provide them the most success of what they're trying to achieve in some ways. And so, as you look at it, it's I love what I do. I love talking with families. I love getting to know new students and really kind of understanding their interests and passions of things, and seeing how you can make those things become a reality and stuff. And so, Yeah, coming earlier, certainly, again, is helpful. It certainly is. And,
Planning and preparation for those students and those parents become really critical. I mean, it's, if you can interject and intersect that student at whatever, grade 7, grade 8, before we get to grade 9, where things are going to start tacking on and counting and doing all that good stuff, is the process of working through expectation to reality, right? But also expectation on where they're trying to get to game plan to either get to or exceed that expectation to put yourself in the best line of success.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you can get them early, that really works out better for everybody else. You can give a game plan, you can give a line of sight that also works from the other side. You're not necessarily looking at it from high school counselor side. You're looking at it from, listen, I've been on the admissions side of this, looking at scholarship admissions and things like that, where they're making these decisions, so I can speak into it a little more clearly as to what those expectations are. In the 10 years of change, in the generational push forward for how college is viewed, the importance of college. I mean, I graduated in 1990, right? And there was, in those days, gosh, that sounds like a really old statement. Back in the days, in those days, it was, it was met with, if you don't go to college, you're going to flip some burgers, and that really kind of was how a lot of people were brought up in that particular generation, that if you want to be successful, you need to have something, bachelor's, something, associates, whatever, behind your name from a college to put yourself in line to get a good job, to have a good career. That is essentially where that is, I would imagine, has changed. I don't think people view college as the be-all to end-all. No. But with the generational change of, like you said, where they're looking at class as just kind of a process, not necessarily the end goal of where I want to be at. Yeah, it'd be great to graduate from A&M, go to some football games, run down to the chicken, do all that kind of stuff. But here's really where I want to be at. And in a lot of cases, where some of these kids want to be at now is being circumvented by a process that doesn't even, in some cases, put these kids in college. Like, they can make contacts, they can identify people that can skirt around that process to get them, the entrepreneurial side of this generation is probably at least expansive, way further in the idea of imagination, as opposed to it's ever been with just like, this is the business, this is what it is. I think the kids in this generation try to find different ways to skin the cat. Yeah,
and I think you almost have to. I mean, when you see the cost of college nowadays, things and how much is escalated, and it is. I try to stress the importance of it, and really, as you're going through that process, that you have viable options.
Right.
It doesn't do you any good to get into a set of colleges, and then you're looking like, well, geez, how am I going to pay for this now and stuff? Like, am I going to sink myself into $80,000 in debt for a bachelor's degree or something like that? And then, so you definitely have to just be more careful in your thinking about your approach to it. I think it is an investment if you're choosing to go that pathway of things. If you think about, like, Texas A&M, it's $125,000 for 4 years. Yeah. That's a really nice sports car. Sure. If you're looking at a private school, you're looking at $250,000. It's a nice home. Right. Yeah. So
right now it's a nice home.
So as you look at that and things is just sort of the importance of it, and that you do your diligence and in selecting the right college if that's the pathway you just happen to choose. Yeah.
Well, and understanding also that say that they're not going on a scholarship, it's not being paid for. They want to land themselves in a role that they can pay that back, and the school is saying, okay, here's your 10-year plan to pay this back to us or whatever, but knowing that you're going to also have a career path that's going to put you in a situation where you can afford to pay that back in 10 years, not defer, not run through this process, and still have a healthy career path long term, to get exactly what it was that you were looking for on the front side. A lot of people change that major in that first year.
Yeah.
You know, and so they go in kind of like what you were saying. They go in with an idea of what they thought they wanted to do. And so I think sometimes the intervention of even, you know, like a company like AGP that can go front side and talk about, tell me what your interests are, tell me what it is that you want to do, you know, and then maybe open pathways and avenues to other thought processes that weren't a part of that. And now all of a sudden that student, before they hit year one, is like, you know what, that deal he was talking about this, that sounds really interesting. And think about what avenues of research you have today versus 30 years ago, where, you know, I can go online, type in something and get every piece of information I'd ever want to know, including pay, you know.
And we look at that. Sometimes we look at that, you know, looking at various careers and what some of the potential earning incomes or outcomes because of it and things. And I mean, there's a lot of information about that's out there, and that's just, you know, I think I've always found myself to be very resourceful and sort of corralling that, and then kind of packaging it and putting it in a way in front of them that, you know, they can then begin to kind of digest in a very easy manner.
So let me give you this final piece here, because we're talking about long-term potential outlook and growth for AGP in the community. You've been doing it now for going on 10 years. And you've seen this change in probably expectation, you know, generational shift change of how people look at college, how they look at preparation to get to college. What do you see in the future for AGP? Let's go 10 more years down the road, and let's kind of tell me what you see, or what changes do you see that potentially are on the horizon for your company?
Well, you know, one of the things is the test optional, and so, you know, we're navigating that. We're seeing fewer families enroll in test prep classes, but we're actually seeing more private instruction. I think our private instruction is way up this year. So that's something that, you know, we're continuing to monitor. But we're also seeing more interest in the application help, essay writing help of things, and so we've been able to help more families this summer that way. And so within that is just being flexible to those sort of individual needs and how the dynamics of the college admission environment is changing and such. And so there is going to be more importance, if you're going test optional, of the things of the grades, of your own personal development and your interests and your service and your essays and stuff. So you're going to be heavily more scrutinized in that way and such. And so where sometimes that test score, a really strong test score, can kind of help to kind of offset,
balance it.
Yeah, some areas that maybe are not as strong. But within us going forward, what I'm really kind of looking at is, you know, I started off working in individuals' homes at first and going into their homes. And then I was sitting in Starbucks on Sunday afternoons, all Sunday afternoons, after about a year of things. And so then that prompted me to get an office space there shortly afterwards. And so right now I'm really working towards getting a storefront of things. So right now we're working out of, a number of office different suites that we have, that we've sort of rented out a corner of a building of things.
Right.
And so looking to get into our own place here probably the next year or two of things. But beyond that, I'm really starting to turn more of my attention of trying to reach a larger demographic and larger population of folks. So not only expanding the set of services for which we have, but trying to reach a different set of people too. So we have this one program called AGP Scholar, and so recently I had my first candidate come through. I took her in as a sophomore, lovely student at Rudder High School, and did not have the financial means to use my services at all.
Right.
First generation, and so within that, I pro bono everything, test prep, consultation, everything. And really, she had this aspiration that she wants to be a lawyer, and so worked with her. And this year, she was admitted into UT Austin, came up from ranked top 15% of her class to top 5%.
Wow.
Moved 10% up in 2 years of things.
Yeah, that's huge.
And not only did she get into UT, but she earned her Terry Scholars Award, which that award guarantees that she graduates debt-free.
Wow.
So essentially, I mean, she has her EFC, or expected financial income, is zero. So she's going to college for free.
Right.
And so what she thought was just, and again, a dream. 2 years ago.
And a success story for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that you're trying to create a bunch of zero, charge, success stories, but the idea of what we were talking about again pre-show, where we're talking about people who have an impact, somewhere in somebody's life, that they have an impact to guide, mentor, train, teach, whatever that looks like. That they can go back to. I was saying that most people who've left high school can probably think back to a teacher, a coach, a counselor, somebody who had a profound impact on their trajectory of what it was that they were doing or looking to do. And so I think ideally in talking to you, I think you see AGP as being that particular entity that can almost act as one of those mentors, that it becomes a place that can change somebody's trajectory.
Yeah, and I think not only for myself, but my employees that we have there, things that we all generally love working with students. We are, happy in that. We find a lot of joy in that. It brings us a lot of great pleasure of seeing other young people succeed. And that's what we're trying to do there in some ways. And so with, HB Scholar program, they're working on building out and trying to expand that into bringing other people into maybe just test preparation that can't necessarily afford. We've also started, I started a College Station Code Society. I noticed there was a large number of students who didn't really have a means of developing their coding skills. And so we've done that. BCS Yes is another group. I started Young Entrepreneurship Society and stuff. So these groups don't necessarily just serve those who are using my services. These services are available for any high school student that's within the community that wants to be a part of these programs or things. And so, and then another thing is the Brazos Valley Rehab Center. I helped to start a nonprofit with them called Go Baby Go. And so Go Baby Go is an opportunity for us to take powered wheel cars and modify those devices for kids who have either mental or physical deficits of some type, and have a means of transportation. So, electric wheelchairs for that age are extremely expensive.
Sure.
And so we can take a car that's, a powered wheel car with about $600-700, modify it, and then now they have a means of getting around and stuff. And then also in a way in which is fitting to their own and what their peers are doing and stuff. Other 3, 4, 5-year-olds cars, they may have their own individual cars driving around, and so now they can kind of feel like them and stuff. So it's not, for me, growing Avant Garde moving forward, it's looking as to not only expand our set of services, but also our reach into different demographics of people too, and how can we continue to make a bigger impact in the community.
Yeah, and open that door of services, to all demographics, really. I mean, to a point of being able, I think there are people in life, you were talking about in the beginning, the idea of becoming a coach, right? And the one thing that I've learned, so I've had people in my life that have poured in and have been mentors, and specifically people who met me at time frames where, money has never been something that was in our family line growing up, so there were moments of things that I was doing outside of school activities. Specifically for me, it was martial arts, of having an instructor that knew we couldn't pay. And I'm talking like $25-30 a month couldn't pay, as opposed to what it is today. But having him tell my mom, just show up, just bring him, because again, he looked at it as, there's something here other than, just the money. There's something here other than just me getting paid. I'm not trying to run a nonprofit, but I understand that this is going to be a success story for me somewhere down the road. And here we are 40 years removed from that. I still have the same instructor, and I still tell this story 40 years later, and it really, again, was cornerstone for me as a part of that mentorship and that leadership from his side, to be able to make that call, to be able to say, listen, just bring him. We'll figure all the rest of it out later.
Yeah, exactly.
And so ideally you're building a business here that wants to see the success of students, not just, making that leap from high school into college, but the preparation and planning to get them successfully balanced into college so that they can go all the way through. and be well prepared, as opposed to showing up and just going, oh my gosh, because then they'd be looking for Robb, who's working in the academics department, to ensure that they're staying online with where they're supposed to be and trying to balance them out and trying to give them a good line. And what we've seen in college now is the level of support mechanism that's there has increased.
Yeah, it has.
Just simply because of what the social need is, I guess, for a lot of students that are coming in. A lot of times that need is increased because maybe the preparation wasn't there on the front side.
Yeah.
And so when there's an entity that can help paint a clearer picture for parents, for students, and then give them a roadmap to help them, especially if they're trying to be selective about where they're going to college. Well, that ideally, most everybody would want that roadmap. Ideally, most everybody would want that guidance and somebody to show them that way. So let's talk about if somebody is interested in getting hold of you and being able to come in, because you do initially start your consultations with parents and with the students is free to start. Is that correct?
Yeah. Just, my website, you can go on, you can, schedule and get access to my calendar of things. And so, I never charge anybody, at first. Free consultation.
Right.
Let's just get to know each other. Let's understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. They can learn a little bit more about what Avant Garde is doing. And again, like you said earlier, if we're really even in line right now to have a conversation to talk about it, I can tell you whether I can impact that student right now or whether it's something that maybe we get back together in a year or two down the road, depending on where that student is at in school, professionally in school or whatever. So they can reach you. It's Robb Jenson, Robb with 2 B's.
Yep.
And they can reach you, again, it's Avant Garde College Prep Services, AGP. Your location, your current location right now is 3206 Longmire Drive, and that's Suite A4. They can reach you by phone at 979-571-6872. Or they can go to your website, which is avantgardeprep.com.
Yep.
And again, you also have there's a form on there where they can fill out to get contact information back from you as well. And lots more information about AGP for they can get in there and really kind of study a little bit more. You've got videos that are in there as well too.
Yeah.
You were talking about how amazed you were at my video scanning process and stuff. So there's lots of good videos in there as well too for people to be able to look at. And kind of get, again, an idea of what it is that you guys are putting forward for them.
Yep.
So, hey, we're appreciative of you coming in.
No,
again,
appreciate
almost
you. Thank you so much.
10 years in the community, man, and still going and continuing to grow it. And so I appreciate what you're doing for the young folks here in the community to help their success rates of getting into the colleges that they're looking for, getting into career fields that they're hopefully looking to get into. I'm sure you've got even a list on your website of success stories, really, people who have used you.
Yeah, so we have some testimonials. We have some. We like to do some student features of things. So a few times a year we're going through and highlighting some students of things. And so,
good blog information on there as well too of stuff that's been written about things. From everything of what colleges are looking for to steps that parents can be taking right now. Things that are of value and of our importance of what they're trying to line their students up for success. So lots of good information just on the site in and of itself that's actually free to use. So so we encourage everybody to check out AGP over here, Avant Garde, and give them an opportunity to show you what they can do for your student and the challenges that they may be facing as they're getting ready to come up and get ready for college here in the next year to a couple years. Also, at the same point, Robb over here is always available for you guys if you have any questions. Schedule an appointment to come in, sit down, talk to him, let him talk about what his company can do for you and your family. And again, we're just so grateful that you're a part of the Bryan College Station area. Look forward to another good, successful 10 years of growth from you.
Well, appreciate
and that you continue forward, man. So thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. It's awesome. I love this, man. I really enjoyed it.
We appreciate you coming in today. And guys, we appreciate you for joining us for the podcast, and we look forward to talking to you on the next one. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.